Uh, so hi everyone, and welcome. Welcome Geeta Gandbhir, the award-winning filmmaker and director, producer of The Perfect Neighbour. Such an incredible film that invites us to bear witness to a devastating story and told entirely and so skillfully through police body cam footage. And my name is Melanie, pronounced she, her, and the director of Reclaim the Frame, the UK's campaign for gender justice in cinema. And it's my privilege to moderate this conversation with Geeta. Welcome, Geeta. Hello.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no, honestly, a pleasure and privilege, and just huge congratulations to start with on your Oscar and BAFTA nomination, and all for Best Documentary for The Perfect Neighbor, and just the incredible success that this film has had so far. You must be so busy, and we're, yeah, really, really pleased that you're taking the time to talk to us. So I just want to start by asking. Uh, if you could tell us first a bit about your own connection to Ajike Owens and the sort of how and when it came about that it would be you to tell her story.
Sure. So the story of the perfect neighbor is not one that we actually set out to make or we went looking for, meaning myself and my team at Message Pictures, which is my production company. But Ajike Owens was a family friend, so that's how we became involved. And the night that Ajike was murdered, I got a call from my sister-in-law, who again was close with Ajika, and we sprang into action. And by we, I mean myself, my husband, and Kang too, who's also a producer on the film, and my team at Message Pictures. And we were on the ground immediately, really trying to support the family and get media attention around the case. Because without media attention, you often see that justice goes sort of unserved, or and Susan hadn't been arrested immediately. So we were concerned because in Florida, where the murder took place, there's been instances such as Trayvon Martin, which is very well known here, where a perpetrator claims self-defense through those stand your ground laws that they claim that they feared for their lives and they acted in self-defense, but they really weaponize this law to commit crimes and get off. So I think this is something that, again, at the time we were deeply concerned about. And then 2 months later, after 2 months after Ajika was killed, the family lawyers sent us a thumb drive. This is myself and Nakan. And on it was all the police evidence and the body camera footage, the ring camera footage, the dash cam footage, the detective interviews that they had acquired from the police. And they used the Freedom of Information Act to get that material here. And it's, again, that is a law that you can use to demand or to request public what are essentially government records, state or federal. And in Florida, after that occurs, those materials become public record. So they were able to acquire them, sent them to us on a thumb drive. We took a look, and I essentially strung all the material out because I'd never seen so much. There was hours and hours of footage. And usually after a crime of this nature, there might be a couple. There's the day of the crime or perhaps the day before. But you don't have, that much material. And after I put it together, because was not, it had to be synchronized, it had to be ordered chronologically. And I realized it went back 2 years prior. That's when I realized there could be a film. And we got the family's permission and began the journey of making the film.
Incredible. And so the footage was all public record. So were there any challenges? I guess once you, I mean, from an ethical point of view, once you had the sort of blessing of the family, from a more kind of legal or clearance kind of rights perspective, was there any challenges to being able to use it, or because it was public record, was that more straightforward?
So we still had to and wanted to get permission from community members who appeared in the footage because, again, it's their lives. You know, we didn't want to just put them up on screen and they not have any idea. So we stayed very connected with the community, and we had to sort of work backwards to figure out who was in the footage and to find them. And that took some time. There were some people we could not find, some children in particular, who maybe didn't live on that block or who, you know, had come from a couple streets over and then who may have subsequently moved. And so those people, if we didn't get permission, we would blur them.
Mm.
And the police had already redacted some people's faces with this very sort of clumsy, blocky blur, you know, that they used. And so we just did the same. We emulated that. And if it was someone we couldn't locate, we would blur them.
And then, I mean, moving on to the editing, or rather just, you know, the way in which the story is crafted. I mean, you say, you know, there's like hundreds of hours of footage there. Okay, you know, some of it, you know, that you can't use if you've, or you may not be using if you haven't managed to clear who's in it. But in terms of, yeah, how you kind of approached crafting the story, I guess, with the sort of incredible kind of responsibility to Ajike's family on the one hand, but also, I guess, with, you know, your audience in mind in the other, in terms of how we can kind of make sense and travel through this story almost entirely just through the body cam footage. I'd love to just hear a bit more about your process of what you chose to
Sure.
include and not, and how you shaped it.
Sure. So I come originally from a scripted background. I worked in scripted films for about 12 years, and that was the beginning of my career. So for me, instinctively, when we watched the footage, my partner Nakan Kwantu and I, we felt that it lent itself to almost like a thriller or a scripted thriller or a horror film. Really, it felt like the Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity or something like that. And what was so interesting to me too is that you see organically in this footage this beautiful community. And the police did not mean to capture them, but they did. They unintentionally captured this beautiful multiracial community living together, loving each other, raising kids together. And then you see the progression through time of how this one outlier who tried to weaponize her privilege, victimhood, and racism and the police against the community was how she escalated and escalated to the point of where she decided to take matters into her own hands, and how these laws like stand your ground emboldened her, and her access to weapons also made her incredibly dangerous. But she was never seen as a threat. She was successful in weaponizing her victimhood and her privilege, honestly. So for us, we really felt that this was something where we could just immerse the audience in the materials and let it play. And the audience, we trusted the audience to follow the story and to understand what had happened. We did keep the material chronological because it was important to, because each sort of scene that occurred built to the next. It's cumulative, right? So that it leads up to the crime. So that was something that kind of from the beginning we knew we wanted to do. But living in the footage was really important for a couple of reasons. One, because I didn't want to go back and re-traumatize the community by asking them, by interviewing them and asking them to talk about this crime they just had to live through, and they'd already been interviewed by detectives. So why do that again? It seemed unnecessary. And also because we really believed we could build a world with this material and show people what this community was like before. Because so often, so many times after a crime occurs, particularly with people of color, we are criminalized, our children are adultified. We are made to to look like it's somehow our fault. And I think through this footage, it becomes very clear, who was the outlier. Even the police say it, that Susan was the only one who ever called the cops, on, again, this community, the kids, it was sort of idyllic. Kids played in the street. They were supervised by parents. They were loved. You have parents who say repeatedly to the cops, one mother who says, "Oh, these kids, it's a group of them, they're all mine." Which was not true. Like, but it was just, this is how they were. The father who comes out and says, "I look out for them like I look out for my own." It's sort of it's the best of our society. And then again, you see how that unchecked, when left unchecked, how this sort of one outlier was able to disrupt all of that.
And finally, I want to come to the impact of the film. Now that it's been reaching audiences globally, it's had so much success. It's widely available on Netflix. So I guess, well, the impact of Ajika's killing and the impact of the film and the conversations that the crime and the documentary have been stimulating. I'm wondering about the impact on the conversations around the stand your ground laws in the US and conversations around racialized violence globally.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
what legacy of both?
Sure, sure, sure. So as far as the impact, I think so this was a little independent film, which we made on our own for no money. And then it got into the Sundance Film Festival here in the US, and we were able to premiere there, and then we got a sale out of it to Netflix. And one of the things that I had promised the family, again, I have no other skills. I'm a filmmaker. That's all I know how to do. And when we talked about making a film, my goal was to get the story out into the world of this community because I felt people should know, and hopefully it would spark conversation and maybe change around these laws. And also the other part of the promise was that if we ever sold it and it made any money, that the majority of it would go to the family. And that was sort of a pipe dream, as it is these days with independent films, but we were very lucky. Netflix saw promise in the film and picked it up. And I think having that platform, obviously a global platform, made it go very wide. It kind of has had many, many eyes on it. For us, that's a dream, to be honest, because the more people that can learn about these issues, talk about these issues, again, it gives us a platform for the issues. And that is really what we wanted. I think there is an impact campaign attached to the film run by my sister-in-law and by Ajika's mother called standinginthegapfund.org. And they are doing work around racialized violence and also for families. They're basically working to support families who are victims of racialized violence and also working to push back state by state against stand your ground laws. So the film does have that too. Again, standinginthegapfund.org to help with the larger impact that we would love to be made. And I think though what's interesting is we saw Stand Your Ground resurface in the news in ways that we haven't seen in a long time after the film's release. And we also saw interesting trends like TikTok. So my children were like, "You finally made it. You're on TikTok." And I was like, okay. For them, that is sort of the bar. But there were these trends on TikTok about what it means to actually be the perfect neighbor, where people would make videos of how they were being where they would say, "I am the perfect neighbor," and like, "I'm allowing the children down the block to use my basketball hoop and to play on my lawn because this is how we show up in our communities." Like, so it's also sparked some funny, sweet viral trends around being a good neighbor and what that really means. So it's been a joy to watch.
So Geeta, thank you so much for speaking with us, and yeah, congratulations on the success of the film so far, and all the best for upcoming nominations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.